mean things, and I need these things to sort of fit in formulas so I could track them and modify them and sort of create and influence the outcomes that I want. And when it comes down to what exactly your state is, that's something that everybody should be in touch with. I describe having a good state as being sort of in control or having access to the entirety of your bandwidth, right? What you're capable of focusing on and connecting to, the entirety of it, not being burdened by stories and distractions so that you could focus and actually get some momentum going. So when I talk about a good state in that sense, it's a light state. It's not burdened. It's not heavy. You have the full level of your capacity. Now, we'll tell you on the side of that, there is this idea of, well, if you are not capable, then even if you have the full, bear of your capabilities at your fingertips, it doesn't really amount to much anyway. So a sort of correlating journey or ladder we should be climbing is increasing our capabilities. If you guys have watched my program, Master the 24-Hour Cycle, which is still free if you go to masterchim.com, I talk about having a template to put on your day, and how in this template is this sort of embedded balance that we approach every day with, so that we do not let one aspect of the entirety of our lives fall by the wayside because of the emphasis on another. That balanced approach is what I feel is necessary to make yourself more capable. Getting back on track to this talk, higher level of capability, being able to access the full capability is something that's going to allow you to climb your ladder. You should smile during the storms. Everybody's going through something at some point. A lot of you guys watching this, maybe going through something right now. And it might be the impetus for you even clicking on the link today to watch it. And I'll say, if you're an individual that is going through something now and you find yourself constantly, consciously connecting and sort of rebounding and reacting to that story that's sort of hanging out with you at any given moment, when we're bombarded by a story and we are therefore negatively affected, as measured by our state, what sort of happens is it's sort of like we're facing whatever it's in front of us, and we have that constant reminder that is sharing that consciousness with us. Whenever I'm going to work, plus I'm worried about the rent. I'm on my way to the gym, plus I'm worried about grandma. I'm going to there is this relationship that we have when we carry these stories with us that just winds up sabotaging our ability to deal with what is in front of us. It sabotages our ability to control the controllable. So I guess first and foremost, I'm making a case for why we should value being in a better state or having the ability to get into a better state. Now, one of the things that also happens when we're carrying that story with us that winds up impeding and sabotaging our capabilities, we also need to come to grips with the fact that just thinking about it all day long isn't necessarily doing anything about it. So there's this sort of this guilt-driven cycle that some of us fall into, where we find ourselves constantly thinking about this thing because we feel that if we don't constantly think about it, it's almost like we don't care. It's almost like we're not taking it seriously or what have you. And I would say, as an alternative to take it sincerely as we should be assessing what in that particular situation is accessible. What of that situation can we control? And the answer to that question, or the outcome of that, process of inquiry, is a series of actions. It's not necessarily the contemplation that we often reduce ourselves to when dealing with our problems. Well, we're going to think about it all day, and that'll show me, I guess, that I'm serious about it. I'm going to worry about this all day. And that'll show that I'm sincere. That'll show that I really am treating this with the attention it deserves. And I'd say it couldn't be further from the truth. I have this issue, Justin. Well, what can you do to solve it? Nothing. You don't have an issue. You have an issue with the story about the issue. If you can't control that issue, then control the story. How do I control the story? I tell myself there's nothing I can do about that thing. So the story that I'm having that's creating stress isn't warranted. It doesn't deserve the energy that I'm giving it. Now, another thing that, some of you guys may be responding with right now is, well, no shit, Sherlock. Oh, don't worry about the things that aren't in front of me. Okay. And I get it. I find myself arguing with myself sometimes in that same vein. Well, here's the thing. As with anything else, we pressure ourselves, and that incremental amount of pressure creates incremental outcomes of power. Meaning, like anything else, this is a muscle that needs to be trained. The ability to focus on the here and now, the ability to maybe not entirely focus on the here and now, but at the very least discard and let go of the stories that aren't relevant to what we're presently engaged in. That's a skill that requires a little bit of training. And as with anything, that requires a training process, there's going to be a timeline of repetitions, and you're going to have to practice. You have to constantly go back to the source of what the mission, the outcome that we're trying to accomplish here is. I'm trying to make sure that the things that are stressing me out are not monopolizing my awareness during the day. Maybe that's the goal that you're telling yourself from time to time. That's what I need to focus on. That's what I'm trying to do. And then you constantly remind yourself of the need to do that. Well, I guess that's the drive, the motivation to get it done. But what are the actual technical steps required? Well, I'm a big believer in having these rituals that collectively allow us to increase our state. It's almost like a guy walking around with a tool bag, and he has all these different tools that he could use to accomplish what he wants to accomplish. Well, if our state is in an unacceptable, dysfunctional level of deficiency, if we're in a bad mood, we're in a bad state, we're stressed out to the point where it's affecting our ability to function, we should have a tool that we could pull out, a series of tools, a bunch of different approaches in the form of rituals that allow us at the end of it to have a state that's enhanced. Now, here's the mistake that a lot of people make. They think that the ritual to improve their state needs to deal specifically, directly with the thing that's stressing them. You got to understand, the answer to to having a profound problem, a significant anxiety driving problem, the ultimate solution is to fix the problem, right? Yeah, we know that. But there is a process between here and there. There's a process between being the person who is stressed out and the person who has solved that individual problem. And what I'm advocating for now and pointing out is that we should be in the best possible level of capability when we engage that process. It's much harder to solve the obstacles in our lives when we are in a dysfunctional state, when we are compromised, when looking at the peak potential of our capabilities, and we're just bringing half of what we're worth to the table. We make things harder, right? So think of it. I'm going to give you guys an analogy. I am short. I'm about 5'5", and I think if you go by the length of my legs, if my upper body matched the length of my legs, I might be 5 feet tall. If you match my legs to my upper body, I might be 5'8". So I might be the tallest dwarf in America. But here's why I bring that up. Number one, obviously, I've never really given a shit about being short. Everyone's like, oh, I'm 5'8", and really they're 5'5". And I'm like, why would you do that? I've never understood that, but that's an aside. One of the things I've noticed being short, the reason I bring this up is I go on a lot of hikes. And when I go on these hikes, I use an app, right? It's called All Trails. That's the app that I use. And a lot of times, you guys can follow me on there, Master Chim. It's on there. I don't even know if that's a thing, but it might be. So if you use All Trails, go and follow me there. And I go on all these different hikes, in the area that, I live up in Pennsylvania and stuff. And one of the things I'll notice is that the pace that I keep is usually, on average, 2 miles an hour, right? So they'll call that a 30-minute pace, right? 30 minutes to do a mile, right? That's the pace that the app uses. Maybe everybody uses it, but the app uses it to determine, what your pace is, what the pace that you've maintained during this particular hike. And mine, on average, tends to be around 30 minutes, right? 2 miles an hour. Well, one of the things I notice is that I'm really fucking slow. So, like, there have been trails that I've been on where I was like, you know what, this is pretty much an easy trail. It might even be rated easy. And so because it's easy, which means, there's not a lot of elevation and a lot of it's, either paved or gravel or something like that. Every once in a while I do one of those trails and I consciously tell myself, you know what, I am going to keep it moving today. I'm going to go faster than I normally do. And then I finish the hike. And instead of a 30-minute pace, maybe I'll have like a 26-minute pace. But then I'll go and look at other people that are on that trail, and they're like 18-minute miles or 19-minute miles. It doesn't matter, men, women, old, young. And at some point, like in the beginning, my Bronx skepticism was like, oh, these people are full of shit. But then I'm like, they're not the ones that track it. The app tracks it, using GPS and stuff. Like, I'm just fucking slow. I got little ass legs. So what's the relevance of all this? When we're going to solve a problem, imagine it's going from one place to the next, as me going on a hike does or is. Well, there is a pace that we can keep to get there. The better our state, the longer our stride. The worse or more deficient our state, the shorter the stride. So we might have to travel the same distance. Well, we do in fact need to travel the same distance, but when we sabotage our ability to be at full capacity, we just take longer to do it. Now, what's the issue with taking longer to do it or to having shorter strides? Well, if you have shorter strides, you got to work twice as hard to maintain the same pace if your stride was longer. Also, by having more strides, you wind up getting more reps that might wind up sabotaging or inviting some sort of dilemma that occurs because you're giving more time for yourself to finish achieving what that mission is, to solving the problem, and something might go wrong from here to there. So we want to solve it as efficiently as possible, lest some other compounding issue, wind up being born from the fact that we allowed this thing to go on for as long as it has. So now what am I talking about? What's the value of this? Okay, but you told me a hiking story. You told me about, being in a good mood. What's the use of this? What's the use? I don't care who you are. You're going to have good states and bad states, and you don't need me to articulate what those things are. You know what they are. You could be in a bad state right now. You could be stressed out about something right now. And what I would say, and this is something that I share in the Three Roads Tribe, I share in my coaching, I share in talks that I give on these types of topics. It's like, oh, what can you do to put you in a better position? What does the solution look like? At some point, if somebody's saying, I can't find the solution, at some point, I'm going to say, well, maybe you should accept you don't have the control you think you do, which is almost good news in that it allows you to sort of put this thing down and walk away from it without it monopolizing your consciousness moving forward. So there are going to be times where if you can't discover a solution after putting in a significant amount of effort, whatever that happens to be for you, I would say, well, go find solutions elsewhere. Go recruit somebody's advice, perspective. Maybe somebody, has some specialized knowledge where this problem is concerned and they could help coach, or guide you, or maybe even do it for you. Like, get it solved that way. And if that's not the case, I can't figure out the solution. I can't find a way to have somebody else find the solution. Well, maybe the solution is not in your control, which means right for now, like at your current level of capabilities, you're not fixing it. And if that's the case, then it's not worth 1 ounce of your energy to contemplate it further. So the bad mood that you're in, the thing that's really fucking with you today, is there something you could do with that about it? Is there something you could do? Well, here's the thing. A lot of people have the issue of their ability to deal with stress is to just contemplate the stressor to fucking death. They sit there thinking about it all day long and all day long and all day long. And what winds up happening is they feel a sense of release and relief only because they've managed to lower their expectation of outcome. They managed to lower the standards of what their mission, represents, and they're like, they get to the point where it's like, I guess there's nothing I could do about it then. And it's like that release and letting go of the control of the story over their consciousness comes by way of a hopelessness, a despair, and that's what it finally takes for them to say, oh, well. I'm just saying, rather than telling yourself a negative story to where you almost get to the mindset where I guess I deserve this, I'm just advocating for letting it go much earlier so that you could be action solution oriented. The guy, my boss at work, he's really stressing me out. He's doing, I've spoken about this application before. It's like, well, leave. I can't leave. Why not? Because I need the money. I got bills. I got kids. I got to pay the bills. I got to pay the rent. I got food in the fridge. So maybe you should stop complaining about the thing that's giving you all those different outcomes. Maybe you should adopt some sort of a mindset where you could be grateful for these opportunities, even the deficiencies of your supervisors or your boss. Because, regardless of how you may feel about it from your untrained perspective, your boss is doing the best he can at his life. He might not have the tools to be able to make you feel better about yours. But should we put that expectation on him in the first place? He's doing his job the best he can. Now, here's what happens. In people's pursuit of significance, they'll make these things. They'll make mountains out of molehills. Because if these things are dire and so like epic in proportion, these problems that they claim to have, the more epic they are, the more epic the individual's life is. So sometimes it makes sense how and why these people make mountains out of molehills. Because if I solve all these problems, maybe I'm just sitting there now just staring at a life that is so underdeveloped that's more scary to me than anything. The people that go on social media and complaining about their bosses, or complaining about their wives or their husbands or some other aspect of their life that they have the ability to change. My wife's a piece of shit. I'm divorcing her. Okay, so divorce her, I guess. Yeah, but I can't believe she did all. Well, divorce her. Well, I'm divorcing her. Well, she should be in a good mood now then, because but I can't believe she. Well, why can't you believe it? It happened. You're gonna have a rough go of it if you can't believe the things that have revealed themselves right in front of your fucking face. I can't believe it happened. It's right there. Why can't we accept things that are right in front of us? Aren't we better off just saying, okay, apparently my formulas that led me to expect one outcome does not sync up with the reality. So that should sort of drive my formulas moving forward. Not waste one bit of energy saying, how come this outcome doesn't match the one that I expected? I can't believe this happened, right? That's literally what people say, because they want the outcome that they expected to happen, so badly, they're willing to ignore the information that reality's trying to arm them with. I can't believe he did that. Well, believe it. If it hadn't happened yet, I guess it's more accurate. It allows you for a little bit more flexibility to say, I don't believe he will do that. But once it's happened, it's not, I can't believe he did do that. Well, that's not a thing. That's not accurate language. That's not logical, in assessing what's in front of you. I can't believe. Well, what do you mean you can't believe it? It's right there. You're saying you no longer trust your eyes, your ears? You know, the mechanisms we use to get all the information in the first place, suddenly those things no good. That's not what people are saying, obviously. They just like the thought of it. They like the saying, I can't believe, or it's not fair, or it's not right, or it should have been, or they have these things that are nested in a reality that they have no experience with. Like that, you can imagine if you're dying of thirst, you can imagine a glass of water in its most minutest level of detail. It is not going to quench your thirst one bit. You got to get water in the real world. So I think that in this, time of surplus, this time of great surplus in society, I think we have people that are really spoiled to dysfunctional levels. The expectations of our lives being customized has far exceeded what naturally is possible. So there's a sort of lack of respect for what reality is giving us in the form of opportunity. It's the starving man who's offered a sandwich and says, I'm not eating gluten. It's like, well, go fuck yourself then. Starve, motherfucker. At what point are the opportunities in front of you that you're saying no to? At what point is the universe not expected to do the same thing? Oh, you don't want it? Okay, no problem. I've spoken about this before. One of my rituals for raising my state is watching those like talent show things, reality shows like American Idol and things like that. Not just in general, but I love those times where somebody goes to audition and they're in front of like hundreds or thousands of people, and everybody, including all the judges, thinks they're going to suck, thinks this is going to be terrible. It's going to be cringy. It's going to be awkward. And then the person just fucking nails it. I love those videos because it's somebody overcoming a struggle. It's somebody, believing in themselves despite all of the energy that's being put at them. And then they step up and they actually perform. I love those videos and those moments. But another thing you will see in those shows are people that are completely delusional. People that have all the confidence as the other person, but they don't have any of the capability. And they come up there and they sing and it's absolutely horrendous. And everybody knows it's fucking horrendous. But they don't know it's horrendous because they're surrounded by an ecosystem that, that they grew up in, that they formed and shaped their identity in, that told them there's no sort of staying anchored to reality in their pursuits. They can go and do whatever they want, whether it's based in reality or not. And here they are. They think they could sing because they want to be a famous singer. They want to be somebody who, when they sing, they get the adulation of others about their singing. They want to be that person, but they just don't have the capability. But because they're not anchored to reality, because that feedback loop of reality that I talk about in the book, because that's not something that they've ever developed, they sit there basking in their delusion, wondering why reality is not molding itself to their wishes. It's not a functional way to be. Sometimes like I design shirts, or I just designed this shirt design for the group, Three Roads Tribe. In the past, I've designed shirts, and I design these shirts, and I'm like, oh man, this shirt's amazing. This design's amazing. This is going to really resonate with the people that like my stuff. And then I put it for sale, and I'll sell 5 fucking shirts. And it's like, really? And it's just a reminder that the world does not revolve around what exists as stories in my head. There's other times where I design a shirt just because it has a saying that I wanted to have on my shirt when I did a talk or did whatever. And then I'm like, I'll put it for sale, and then it'll sell 500 of them. And it's like, really? This is the shirt you guys were into? Showing me once again that I got a lot to learn. And that what exists as stories in my head is not a reflection of what reality is holding for me to see. And I'm constantly addressing or adjusting what's going on in my head to match what exists in reality. That's the process. Let me get to some of these comments. Yarn Saxo writes, letting go of the need to control is hard for a woman brain. Hard but doable with constancy and discipline helps us ladies to move forward with right act over that emotional thinking and worry. Well, and that was a commentary on what I was talking about earlier, and I agree. And again, I reiterate, like anything that we see as a deficiency, the solution is not a switch. So sometimes what will happen is people will understand where they are. They'll understand where they want to go. They may even understand the process from here to there. If it was a button, they'd press it. To get from here to there, they'd press it. But the only reason they don't engage in the process to get to that goal is because the process is not as easy as them pressing a button. Because their life is surrounded with buttons. They don't have a relationship with struggle. They don't have a relationship with discipline. They don't have some sort of transcendent code or standard that refuses complacency in a situation that doesn't match who they claim to be. I made a post the other day, and it was a picture of me wearing one of the Three Roads Tribe shirts, and it was the picture of my pops that I have right there, right? So this is my home office. That's the picture of my pops. That's his hat that he wore, his favorite hat that had his Vietnam crew, his airborne division, represented. This is my grandfather's hat right here, his Navy hat that I got to get, after he passed a few years back. Like, I have standards. The post that I made was in reference to the relationship I had with my dad and how, regardless of the upbringing he had and the deficiencies that he had as a result of a very deficient upbringing, he still understood the value of persistence, the value of never stopping, never quitting, of keeping to drive forward. And it was a tremendous model of that virtue that I was able to observe all of those formative years. I wrote, and I'm not the first one to coin this, but in that post I wrote, I'll never lose, because a man who never quits can never lose, because there's always another chance. That's the point. So we have to engage with the process, because the process is the thing that is, number one, more difficult than a button, but also holds all of the virtues that come by way of navigating it. Because it's pressured, we get the lessons and the benefits of having engaged that pressure. We don't get any stronger hitting buttons. We don't get stronger flicking switches. Climbs. That is what gives us the strength. When we have to climb to somewhere. Let's see what else is going on. All right. Sean, what's up, Sean? He says, it's one thing to have feelings and acknowledge them. It's another thing to have feelings about your feelings. I don't want to get stuck in that negative feedback loop. And right on, there's something, the idea of a negative feedback loop. Negative, people bad, negative is something that's, bad, evil. Like there's one level of, or there's one direction that negative, resides in somebody's opinion of it, or the common understanding of what that concept means. But negative is actually the removal of something, the void, or the absence of something. So we should always avoid negative feedback loops, because what that is a cycle of thought that erodes our identity as it goes on. So negative in that it removes something every single time, right? So if we're somebody who, like, I don't know if you guys have ever seen in growing up in the Bronx, we had these things called piraguas. Now, piraguas are like some guy would have a big block of ice, and it would be covered. He'd have a little cart, and you have a bunch of these, flavored juice syrupy things. And basically, he'd shave the ice. It was like a snow cone, right? And he'd have this scraper, and he would take the scraper, he'd uncover the ice, he'd scrape a bunch of ice into the scraper, he'd put it in a cup, and then he'd pour the thing on it. Well, negative feedback loops is like a scraper to the ice of our identity. Every single time you go through it, it takes a little bit more off the top till eventually there's nothing left. That's what negative feedback loops will do in this application. So we always have to anchor ourselves to reality, because reality is a constant. Reality is a constant movement that we could sort of ride the momentum of. If I say movement is mandatory, and I don't want to get too esoteric heady here, but if I say movement is mandatory, it's because the alternative is a sort of completely internalized negative feedback loop that just results in you being done for. The erosion of your identity in its entirety. We have to anchor ourselves to other things. Have you guys ever been in a really bad mood and then something happens and it distracts you? Maybe it cheers you up. Maybe it just gives you enough of a distraction that you sort of let go of the hold. Almost like we get in these negative trances. And every once in a while, reality, comes into contact with us, and it sort of snaps us out of that trance. It's not a literal trance, but it is certainly a commentary on the focus we're driving in some sort of negative feedback loops direction. And something from the outside world comes into contact with us, and we pull back. We scale out of that, and we now address what we're doing in the big picture. And we get out of that sort of that tunnel, right? That's what being anchored to reality does. Every day, every morning, I go out. One of my morning rituals, I go outside, right? And I look at the sky. I smell the air. I'm fortunate in that I live, right next to the woods. So when I go outside, I'm hearing animals and hearing the breeze run through the trees. And like, there's all sorts of life that exists as a constant that I can come into contact with to get me out of my head. And I think that is a good way to look at it. Like, these rituals get us out of our head, because we can't be trusted to reside completely in our head. We want to make, our consciousness and what exists inside of our subconsciousness, we want to make it more appealing. We want to make it a more productive place to spend some time in. But we can never reside there. We have to connect with the outside, lest we get caught in that internal feedback loop. This is why movement is mandatory. When I say that, one application, but a lot of people reduce it to this idea of, well, we got to stay in shape. We got to move our bodies. And that is absolutely a component of it. But the mental movement that also encompasses this concept addresses our ability to not get stuck in these loops, to not live or exist dysfunctionally in our heads. When I talk about being in a good state, the topic of today's talk, you should smile during the storms. But why should I smile during the storms? I don't know. Answer that question. And there you go. Now you have an answer. What's something that you could smile about during a storm? When everything seems to be falling apart, what can you be grateful for? What can you, how can you position the situation you're in as the ultimate training scenario? It's sort of like you woke up, right? I do jiu-jitsu, been doing jiu-jitsu, for over 20 years. And I've had some really hard training sessions. I know the benefit of being in these hard training sessions is I've gotten better as a result. Sometimes training sessions don't always go my way, but at the end, the fact that I survived and endured that experience, I am more because of it. Well, sometimes life throws an obstacle in our way, and it's almost like waking up in the middle of one of those hard training sessions. You didn't plan it. You didn't schedule it. You didn't travel here. You didn't fit it in with everything else going on, but here it is. You're in the middle of it. And sometimes it's hard to just say, well, here I am. It's time to train. And disconnect from those other thoughts, that are telling you, oh man, I was supposed to be doing this. I can't believe this is happening. I was supposed to do this today. Right? That's how that's all connected. All right, guys. What's up to everybody? I see all these comments from YouTube and Facebook. I appreciate you guys putting them. Let's call it there. I got a bunch of stuff to do, and I got out what I wanted to. I hope you guys appreciated this talk. Gentlemen, if you have not yet gone to threeroadstribe.com, go there, check it out. And it's $9 a month. It is worth it. And I talk about a lot of these issues, but in a much more systemic fashion. There's a lot of training there. As soon as you join, you'll have access to a bunch of training videos and a community of guys that are, like-minded and on mission. I appreciate you guys. I will be here next week, same time. And as always, brothers and sisters, pressure to power.